Welcome, I'm Jennifer Salazar and this is Toronto Cares. Every single day in Canada there's an estimated 4 people killed and 207 more injured as a result of alcohol and drug-related crashes. Mothers Against Drunk Driving has been working to raise awareness on this important issue in Canada for more than 20 years now. In this episode, focusing on MADD's Toronto chapter, we see how they help victims, how they continue to get the message out, and we meet just a few of the many people whose lives have forever been changed because of this violent crime.
As a family, we came here from England in 1972, and Richard is actually, my husband is actually Canada's 10 millionth immigrant. It was Valentine's Day in 1981, and it was Sunday. Very early in the Sunday morning, a telephone rang, and I answered it. It was my father-in-law in England who asked to speak to my husband, and they spoke briefly. My husband put the phone down and turned around and told me that my dad had been in an accident the night before. I didn't cross my mind that when I said what's wrong with him, that I would be told that he'd been killed. The police told us that my dad and his friend had gone out for a beer. They did this, something they did every Saturday night, and they were walking home. They were crossing the road, but they stopped to make sure that there was no traffic coming. The road was clear, and so they were crossing, and they were just one step from the far sidewalk when a young man who turned out he was 19 years old, driving way too fast. He hit my dad and his friend. The young man didn't bother stopping. He just left my dad and his friend at the side of the road and went home. And he did turn himself into the police the next day. And so that's too late to do breathalyzers, but my dad lived in a small town where everybody knew each other, and lots of people came up to us afterwards and told us that the young man had been really drunk when he left the pub, and he was doing he was just racing to go from one to another and drinking at each one. And there was not that much awareness about drinking and driving. You would hope today that somebody would have taken, his keys from him and stopped him from doing that. It was very difficult for my family, knowing we got responsible kids, that almost 12 years to the day after my father was killed. It was 1993, and Emma was with us on that Friday night. We were just sitting and watching the television, and it would be about 10:15 when our doorbell rang. And Richard went to answer it, and he went upstairs, and Emma and I looked at each other and said, who knows, it's visiting at 10:15 at night. And we decided it was probably Rob, our eldest son. He'd just been to Whistler snowboarding for 2.5 weeks, and he'd moved in with some friends about 6 weeks before, so half his stuff was still in his room, and and so he said, it's probably Rob. He's on his way out somewhere and probably going downtown and needs, to pick something up. But we sat there, and there was just no sound, and it was just really quiet. So eventually we decided we better find out what was going on. And when I got to the top of the stairs, the person that was in the doorway was a police officer. And I knew before I was told why he was there. And my husband turned around and told me that Rob would never be coming home again. I remember my knees buckling, and I just, fell to the floor. And so they drove us there, the 3 of us, and I think probably the longest ride I've ever taken in my whole life, and I'm not very proud. I was actually, my thoughts in that police car that night was I was hoping he'd lent his car to somebody else. But there was no mistaking when they took us into the emergency room, and they took us to a gurney, and a young man that was lying there was no mistake. It was no mistake. It was our eldest son, Rob. And I think it must have been after midnight that another police officer came to us and told us that he just had news from the police station. And he told us that the young woman that was driving the car that had hit Rob's car, he told us that she was 32 years old. She'd only had a driver's license for 10 days, but she was also driving with a blood alcohol of 200, which is 2.5 times the legal limit. I'm still angry at what happened, and I'm still sad. There's not one single day that goes by that I don't miss him, and I wish he was here. I've watched my other kids grow up, and Ian still lives in San Francisco, and he's got Lucy, who's 9, and she's just a great kid, and Emma lives in the east end of Toronto, and she's got Matthew, who's 6, and Claire, who's 4. And I play games with myself, and I think, well, he's there in San Francisco, and Emma's here, and Rob's somewhere else. And it's only when we get together as a family that sometimes I have to go away, and I have to walk away because I just look at the two of them. And there's always a third one that should be there with his kids that's missing.
After the break, we attend a MADD-supported ride spot check, and we catch one of MADD's high school multimedia presentations.